Welcome to Democratic Television, a program of the Santa Clara County Democratic Party that brings insights, perspectives, and attitudes of our always thoughtful Democratic guests. Today we're joined by Mountain View Councilmember Lenny Siegel. Lenny, thanks for being on Democratic Television.
I'm glad to be here.
So you are a current council member. We film in Mountain View's community access TV station. It's perfect to have you here. Let's get to know you a little bit better, though, because you didn't always, start out this way. Where are you from? Where'd you grow up?
I grew up in Culver City in Southern California.
Oh.
And graduated from Culver High School. I was actually a young Democrat in middle school in 1964. I was middle school or high school. We were out registering voters against Proposition 14. So I got started early, and then I came up to Stanford in 1966.
Did you come from a political family?
Yeah, my family was very progressive, and my brother was in Mississippi in 64. Was it 64 Mississippi summer?
Yeah. And
my sister was arrested in Sproul Hall in 65, and my parents were very supportive. So yeah, we're definitely a progressive family. And the peace movement, civil rights, you name it.
So it wouldn't be surprising for people that look back then and see that you're still living that life. You're still fighting for social justice.
Absolutely. It's in our genes.
Yeah. So coming to Stanford, was that a radicalizing thing, or was that just a continuation? I would say that was tumultuous.
I would say it was an opportunity to work with a lot of people who were headed in the same direction. I did learn a lot. I came up to Stanford because I wanted to be a physicist and do science in the community of technical scholars. And I got here, I realized that most of it was dominated by the Defense Department. So I spent my years at Stanford trying to extract Stanford from the military-industrial complex.
How well did that work out?
Well, we put an end to secret research.
Okay.
And shifted a lot of the focus of science at Stanford to health sciences. But we didn't stop war.
Well, and that was a noble goal.
Yeah.
But you worked on other projects that I think still work to have that understanding of where the budget is being spent so much in defense and so little on people's issues.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And we worked on things from the support for the farm workers to civil rights, bringing ethnic studies into the university. We even in 1970 we were working on the jobs, housing, and balance.
Haven't solved that one either.
Nope, but we're making some progress.
Yeah. What was it like being in did you live on campus, off campus?
I lived on campus for 1 year, and then I lived in East Palo Alto. And Stanford is an interesting place. It's, on the one hand, it is a key institution for the American empire. On the other hand, because Stanford trains the elite, has historically, you get a good education, and a lot of the students I was there with were from ruling class families, and they started to understand why the system wasn't working the way it was supposed to. And so it was a very liberating experience, and the friendships I made back in the 60s are still going.
So you saw people have the light bulb go off and start questioning, and maybe some professors too.
Oh, absolutely. Stanford was a great place to learn, but I never graduated.
Oh, I was going to ask if you got your PH in nuclear medicine, or
no? I was kicked out for demonstrations.
Oh, I'm proud of you.
So
what was your next activity?
Well, so I moved to Mountain View in 1972.
Oh.
My wife was living here, and we moved into an apartment. Got involved in Mountain View politics, ran for office a few times, was served on the Planning Commission. But also I was working with a nonprofit that we formed out of the Stanford movement called the Pacific Studies Center. And we did a lot of work on a variety of issues, on foreign policy, on labor issues, on the jobs, housing, and balance, researching Silicon Valley. And a lot of my expertise became what was going on in Silicon Valley, and gradually that focused on the environmental issues associated with the electronics industry.
So you worked with people like Ted Smith
Absolutely.
and
At the Toxics Coalition, yeah. And I'm actually still doing the work that we started with the Toxics Coalition in 1981.
Wow.
You talk to EPA and they say after 30 years cleanup doesn't cost anything because of the discount rate, and I say, yeah, but I've been working on this site for 34 years, and it's still very contaminated.
Yeah, yeah. So how did organizations like that get funding? Because you had to have, I assume, some kind of a location. Some
Right.
people had staffs raising families and all that.
It was very, small donations, writing for money. Wrote a book in 1985, High Cost of High Tech. But by and large, we survived by not paying ourselves much and doing other work. So for the first few years I was in Mountain View, I was an apartment manager.
Okay.
So yeah, that nonprofit movement work isn't very remunerative, however it's said. And then in 1994, I was hired to direct a project at San Francisco State University that was essentially funded with the help of Nancy Pelosi through the Defense Department, and then it was called Career Pro. Now it's the Center for Public Environmental Oversight. It's no longer at San Francisco State University. It's now affiliated with the Pacific Studies Center. But we promote basic community involvement in the oversight of military base cleanup and Superfund site cleanup and brownfields all over the country. And so since around that time, I've gotten most of my money and actually gotten real salaries funded by the federal government.
Oh, that sounds progressive.
It's been a great opportunity. I get to work with communities all over the country that are trying to figure out what to do about contamination, how to reuse properties, and I'm able to take experiences that we've developed here in Mountain View to them so that they can make their communities better.
It seems to me that when a lot of the Superfund discussions began, there was a lot of pushback. I know the problem isn't so great, and no, the plume doesn't run, 18 miles west and, is taking out all our groundwater. The science, I think, is probably a lot stronger, and you may not have to have quite that many fights.
It depends upon who's in power in D.C. When the Democrats are in power, EPA is stronger, and when they aren't, it's a lot harder. The state of California has been pretty consistent in promoting environmental cleanup, but we're still getting pushback from local industry.
It seems to me that because there's such a negative attachment to Superfund sites and the damage it does to unborn children and all that it's probably not a real winning argument on their part to be totally defensive.
Yeah, absolutely. But again, it costs them. It's cheaper for companies to invest money in weakening standards than to pay for thorough cleanup. And sometimes they succeed on the chemicals that I work on most, trichloroethylene, which is in the groundwater in Mountain View and Sunnyvale and several other Bay Area cities. We're holding pretty strong with the support of US EPA.
Now, what is this chemical? How did it get there? And
it's a solvent that's been used by the aerospace industry, electronics industry, a lot of other industries. It's a very effective solvent. Unfortunately, it causes cancer and birth defects. And they would pour it into underground storage tanks when they were done with it, and it would eventually eat through the tanks and leak into the groundwater. And now, even though our drinking water is safe, there are places where it's coming up into buildings. It's sucked up into the buildings out of the groundwater. It's called vapor intrusion, and that's currently the work I do nationally is around vapor intrusion.
Gee whiz, and we're so close to the bay, I just think there's probably lots of implications.
Not with this particular chemical. The same reason it comes up into building, it's volatile, it basically evaporates, means if it hits a surface water, it doesn't stay there. So we have other chemicals that are a threat to the bay, heavy metals from electronics fabrication, but TCE itself is less of an ecological risk.
It seems to me maybe because of people like you and organizations like yours and progressive leadership and where money can be shelled out, those sites eventually will have to be cleaned up. I mean, they're there. It's non-negotiable to say it's not there or the problems have been mitigated or we can concrete it over.
The best scientists in the field say it'll take hundreds of years to clean up sites like the MEW Superfund site in Mountain View. So what we can do is we can contain the plume, reduce the contamination, and make sure people aren't exposed. But big sites like that don't clean up in our lifetimes.
Now, why is that? I mean, I'm ignorant about why it would take so long. What's involved in cleaning up?
So TCE as a liquid is denser than water. It sinks within the groundwater and then it sorbs to the soil. So if you think of trying to clean a dirty lake one scoop at a time, you clean a little area and then the other contamination flows back in. And a lot of this stuff is deep and it's hard to get to. So it's technically very difficult. And I serve on committees that argue about what to do about that. Do you give up or do you figure out a way to make sure you're doing the most you can?
Is there a work trying to find other chemicals that might neutralize the deadly ones? Or?
Yeah, I mean, one of the technologies that's been used in Mountain View is called in situ chemical oxidation. And they squeeze toothpaste-like substances like permanganate into the ground. And where you can reach the TCE, it destroys it. The problem is getting to everywhere the TCE is. And we're expecting that we're going to focus on some key areas where people live, where there's redevelopment, but it's not practical to do this everywhere throughout the industrial area of Mountain View.
Wow. And that's just Mountain View. You said Sunnyvale.
Yeah, Sunnyvale's got a big plume where they're finding vapors going into schools and houses. Not a lot, but the EPA's doing a very good job of investigating that. And there are sites throughout Silicon Valley. People don't know about all of them. Palo Alto's got some big ones. So it's this area, we're fortunate because of the activism. You mentioned the Toxics Coalition and the work we did back in the 80s. Led EPA to do things here earlier than a lot of other places because they knew they had support from the community and from our elected officials.
That's the winning combination to at least get the issue addressed and acknowledged.
Yeah.
Wow. We're going to take a little break right now. When we come back, as I mentioned, you are Councilmember Lenny Siegel. We'll talk about all that and more.
Okay.
We'll be right back.
Hi, I'm California State Senator Joe Simitian, and we live in very exciting times. This is an opportunity for all of us to step up, face the challenge, not only for America, but for California and for Santa Clara County as well. One place we can do that is through our California Democratic Party at the state and local level. It's an opportunity to make sure that the views and values we hold dear are expressed in the decisions that get made at every level of government. It's also, frankly, a great opportunity to spend time with like-minded folks who share our commitment to doing good works in the community and beyond. So take this opportunity to get in touch with your local Democratic Party, 408-445-9500, and we can make a difference together for California. Thanks so much.
Welcome back to Democratic Television and our guest, Mountain View Councilman Lenny Siegel. Lenny, I do want to talk about your running for council and obviously winning. Before that, tell us a little bit about the nonprofit that you direct.
Well, the Center for Public Environmental Oversight focuses on environmental cleanup, and it combines the work that we do locally on the cleanup of Moffett Field, including Hangar 1, and the MEW Superfund plume with work with communities all over the country. I primarily get money right now from US EPA, and I spend a lot of time visiting other communities around the country, sort of as an expert, sort of as an organizer.
Sounds like it's very worthwhile work.
It's great to be paid to do something that's helping people organize and get things done in their communities.
Yeah. So speaking of helping people get things done in their communities, at some point recently you decided to rerun for council. What made you want to be on the city council, knowing that it takes a lot of time and not all the issues are yours?
Well, about a year and a half ago, I realized that the Mountain View City Council, including some of the people that I've supported, friends, was planning to allow the development of 3.4 million net new square feet of office space in North Bayshore. That's Google, LinkedIn, Intuit, et cetera, and no housing. And this was going to aggravate the jobs housing imbalance, which is forcing people out of town, raising rents, creating traffic jams enormously. And I tried to get somebody else to organize around it. Nobody else would, so I formed the Campaign for Balanced Mountain View. My plan was to support 3 candidates for city council, and as we approached the deadline, no one was taking a stand on that issue. And so I threw my hat in the ring. And in the election, had 9 people running, 8 serious candidates. 4 were for housing in North Bayshore, 4 were against it, and we came in first, second, third, and fifth. It was a turnaround for Mountain View, and we're going to see the benefits of that very soon and for a long time.
People said, no, we can't do it, and it's just, there's no value in not dealing with this. In fact, there's a negative value.
This area suffers from having too many good jobs. You know, I travel around the country, and people laugh when I say that, but we have all these people moving into this area, being paid very well, and it's forcing out longtime residents, including a lot of our, the lower paid people, and they've been showing up at City Council about that, and it's actually a crisis. And if you try driving with the direction of commuters, it's a crisis. And the root of the problem is we've been allowing companies to expand employment and not providing housing. And our hope in Mountain View is to do such a good job of that our neighboring cities will do the same.
Why wouldn't companies say, yeah, we want to attract more people, more jobs, but we know that part of the key is offering housing?
Well, actually, some of the companies, like Google, the biggest one, biggest employer, biggest property owner in Mountain View, does want housing, and they do want transit. And I talk to them. I don't exactly agree with them on everything, but one of the reasons we've been able to build support from some of my colleagues on the council who have more of a libertarian approach is they aren't necessarily for housing, but they believe Google should be able to do what they want. So between the people who we elected who are pro-housing, and then we actually had a unanimous vote in February to include housing in the North Bayshore area. And we've had a series of workshops now. We're starting to make decisions about, that's probably going to be several thousand housing units in an area close to employment. So, if you're worried about greenhouse gases, people walking and biking to work is a good solution.
Yeah. And it's an evolution, I'm sure, to educate people. This is what we need to do. And a laissez-faire attitude is going to be deadly. And we're going to be in such total gridlock.
A lot of homeowners around here are nervous that new housing construction is going to damage their quality of life. And if there are a whole lot of construction on their street, it might do that for a little while. And so that's why we focused on North Bayshore, where we have a mobile home park with 360 units, but no single-family homes. And the other thing is, this was from my personal experience, when I formed the Campaign for Balanced Mountain View in March of 2014, I had 2 adult children living at home with me. That's not the solution to the jobs housing imbalance. I love them very dearly. But when I went out campaigning in some of the more conservative areas of Mountain View, I recognized from the precinct list that there were a whole lot of families in that situation. People whose grown children, employed children with good jobs, were living at home because they couldn't afford to buy a house here and they couldn't afford the rents. And so that was the way I got across to people who normally wouldn't support housing or housing for poor people, that it was in their interest because they wanted their families to stay together in the same region. It was in their interest to allow for more housing that fortunately wouldn't be in their direct backyards.
Although some were, I've understood people put up tents and all kinds of creative solutions.
That was one gimmick. But we do have a lot of people living in vehicles in Mountain View. And the irony of it, I think, is that most of these people seem to be employed, and a lot of them have kids in the schools. And we've had hearings at the City Council where school children, middle school children, are coming in saying, "I really want to stay in Mountain View. I'm getting a good education. I'm part of a program that teaches me how to program, but my parents can't afford to live here. They're already working 3 jobs. We may have to move to Manteca or Mexico. And I want to stay here and get the opportunity to improve myself."
What are some ideas you have to help deal with that?
Well, the most important thing is to build housing and to build more subsidized housing. I want to limit old housing that we tear down, and I really would love for some of the employers to do their expansion in San Jose or other places where people live. That's a harder sell. Most communities don't want to do anything to limit jobs. And then we had a group, hundreds of people coming before our council asking for rent stabilization, and I supported that, but a majority at this point still won't go along with that.
Maybe it just takes more education and more kids coming to council meetings saying, you're going to bounce me from here to so far away.
It may take another election.
More folks.
People are, the fears of rent control that have been inculcated people through their college economics courses or landlord support in their elections is hard to overcome. We at least had a discussion of it, but it's an uphill fight.
And that's an issue you've looked at for decades as one way to deal with this challenge of people getting priced out.
Yeah, actually, when Proposition 13 passed in '78, I led up an effort for rent relief and rent control in Mountain View, and we lost. And and now it's come up again. It's not easy in an area where people will sign a petition, but while they're waiting for the election, they have to move because their rents have gone up so much. And that was the problem we faced way back then, and we may face that problem again now. People can't wait for the government to react to the crisis.
Right. Well, and the government exists on so many levels, so getting activists like you willing to run and kind of put a lot of your regular life on hold that's what it takes, but how long can people keep doing that?
And in fact, when I was running, this wasn't an issue, and I told people I'm ducking the issue because the groups that were supporting, people and groups that were supporting me on the key issue in the campaign, which was housing in North Bayshore, were split on rent stabilization.
So talk a little bit more about the transportation piece to this, because people do come to Mountain View. They come from San Jose and elsewhere, and the roads aren't working as a result. Public transportation isn't utilized.
All you have to do is try to drive someplace around here during the rush 3 hours in the morning or the rush 3 hours in the afternoon, and you know how bad traffic is. And unfortunately, countywide transit money has been used only to expand BART in San Jose, or to San Jose, and it hasn't been used to provide any sort of new fixed transit in North County other than Caltrain, which is very successful. Mm-hmm. And so now the North County cities are getting together and saying, we need money to support transit for the commute traffic. It's not really anti-San Jose because a lot of the people who are commuting up here live in San Jose.
Yeah, they'd like to see it.
Yeah, so we want to see something along the 85 corridor, something along the 237 corridor. In the area where I'm most optimistic, because it's within Mountain View, is we've just decided to study putting a fixed transit link between downtown Mountain View and the Caltrain station and North Bayshore. And I'm hoping we'll be able to tax the companies that are doing the head tax or commuter tax on companies like Google and LinkedIn. And the nice thing about it is they aren't against that because
it's in their interest.
It's in their interest to have that transit.
Yeah.
They do the buses, the big white buses, because there's no alternative. But they would love to have a public transit system that serves everybody. Yeah. And one of the nice things about that is if we actually put several thousand housing units in North Bayshore, the hope is that people won't have to have cars or have to drive them. They can walk to work and take the transit downtown.
Let me shift here a little bit. You're also known for the Hangar 1 at Moffett Field. Tell us, we have about a minute to discuss that. You saved it. It was going to be taken down.
Basically, Hangar 1 was built in the 1930s out of contaminated substances. And when the Navy was forced to clean it up, they just wanted to tear it down. And the community here, environmentalists, Navy veterans, people who just grew up with this hangar in their backyard said, hey, we want to save it. And we couldn't get federal money for it, but finally got a lease for Google at Moffett Field, so Google's going to be paying for it. And they're just waiting for permission from all the government agencies to put a new cover on it.
Yeah, because it's huge and it is so iconic, and it's got a real place in our history.
Historic landmark, and it's one of the world's largest freestanding buildings.
Well, that must have been something that had people go, yeah, Lenny,
Well,
we don't always agree with you, but we're with you on this
the
one.
first door I knocked on in the campaign, I'm all prepared to talk about housing and transportation, and the guy said, I don't care, but thank you for Hangar 1. It really, literally happened, you know.
Yeah.
You know, so.
Well, you've raised a lot of interesting issues in our interview. Do you have a way for people to contact you, a website, or and what could people expect if they reach out to you? What do you want to get them involved in?
Well, locally, there's all the cleanup work that's still going on, and there's the Campaign for a Balanced Mountain View, which is working to try to solve the jobs, housing, and balance. So, you know, you can go to cpeo.org, O-R-G, for my professional work, and it has my email and phone number there. Or you can go to the City of Mountain View, mountainview.gov, to contact me through my city email address. And I would urge people who want to work on the jobs, housing and balance, housing, transportation, all the related issues, to ask to join the Campaign for Balanced Mountain View email list. It has a lot of lively discussions. Not everybody agrees, but a lot of lively discussion on the issues that are facing our communities.
Let me ask you this final question. Do you feel optimistic?
I feel optimistic in some areas. We're making a lot of progress. The election last November made a big difference, but we've got a long way to go. You know, in some ways, we're fortunate that the big companies here share some of the interests of the community on sustainability, on housing, on transit, but our economic system is still stacked against people at the bottom.
Right.
And you know, getting people to understand the fundamental basis of our problems, that's going to take a lot longer.
Okay, I didn't expect a simple answer. Thanks for being on our show.
Good to be here.
Thank you. Thanks for watching Democratic Television. Give us a call at 408-445-9500 or visit our website, sccdp.org. Help make a difference. Join Lenny. See you on the campaign trail.